Okay, I'm going to give a slightly lengthier introduction to Channing. So earlier this year, not this week, it hasn't been that crazy of a week, our guest, Channing Dungey, the first African-American president of a major TV network, made the call to cancel the wildly popular show Roseanne, the reboot of Roseanne. After its star, Roseanne Barr tweeted a racist joke about former Obama administration official Valerie Jarrett. As a founding member and current board member of Step Up, a nonprofit dedicated to helping girls from under-resourced communities fulfill their potential, her passion enacts change. So we're going to discuss change, media, a lot of other stuff. Channing Dungey is the president of ABC Entertainment Group. So now that that's set, I wanted to start out, so we will get to Roseanne because I know we all have a lot of questions about that, even though there's already been so much written about it. This was huge news, obviously. But just to start with, there was one article that came out last May when all this went down, and the headline was, it was a Refinery 29 article, and it said, "Enough about Roseanne, let's talk about Channing Dungey." So you haven't been out there in the spotlight very much. You've stayed behind the scenes, even though you've had a long and illustrious career already in entertainment. So was that intentional, not being in front?
I don't know if it was intentional as much as it was, look, I see myself as a creative advocate to storytellers. That's sort of my role, and it always has been. I went to UCLA, the School of Theater, Film, and Television, and while I was there, I became really interested in the skill set that I was learning in my screenwriting class, which was reading material, analyzing that material, and then being able to give feedback on the material to my classmates, which is the fundamental process of development, creative development of scripts and projects, and that led me into my career in the movie business and from there into television. And in order to be a good creative advocate, I'm not supposed to be the story, right? The story is the story. And it's my role to help storytellers realize their vision. And it's hard to do that if you're the person standing in the spotlight. So for me, when situations happen like the Roseanne situation, or even when I was appointed to this position, which I knew would be newsworthy, but I thought in kind of a trade publication kind of newsworthy. I didn't think that it was going to be national news kind of newsworthy. That's a role that I just don't normally sit in.
Have you gotten used to it?
To a certain extent, I guess. Yeah.
And your sister is an actress, right?
She is, yes.
So you're both in entertainment.
I know, but I grew up in a family where she's the spotlight person, and I was like the behind-the-scenes person. I was running tech for all of her, creative performances in our household. So.
And by the way, you don't come from an entertainment Hollywood family.
Not at all. Not at all. I know. My sister, from a very early age, was really into performing and plays and the whole nine yards, and I was always a voracious reader and, ambitious creative writer, and we both ended up in the careers that we were sort of meant to be in. But yes, I was never the person that sought out the spotlight.
Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit about change in your industry, because just in the last few years, we've seen enormous change. Did you, we saw this happen in the music industry, right? Some pretty comparable, things that have unfolded, and the way that they've unfolded. Granted, there are some differences. Did you see this coming?
I wouldn't necessarily say that I personally saw it coming. I mean, I definitely experienced what was going on in the music business as a consumer, right? And I think we've been talking a lot over the past couple days of how rapidly things are changing and how sort of the idea that technology is catapulting businesses forward in ways that are fundamentally changing them in such dynamic ways so quickly. And I think the biggest lesson for us as people who are in the content business is that we have to think about the consumers, and our consumers want to watch what they want to watch, when they want to watch, and they want to watch it on their terms, right? And I do think that to a certain extent, the advance of, first, premium cable and now streaming has enabled consumers to be a part of making those decisions, and then it's up to us in the media space to find a way to accommodate them while still running our businesses, and it's something that we're working on constantly.
Do you think, you've had some pretty incredible talent go from, ABC to Netflix, specifically Shonda Rhimes, Kenya Barris most recently. I know they're getting these enormous deals that have, at least the reports that are out there. But there's also a question of, at least in some cases, of, did they have not just the money, but did they have the ability to tell the kind of stories that they want to tell on broadcast television? What do you think it is that's more the attraction of going over to a service to a platform like Netflix?
So here's what I will say is that, especially if you're going to compare streamers to broadcast, those are fundamentally different businesses in so many respects. And when people try to compare them, I get really frustrated because it's not even the question of sort of apples to apples or even apples to oranges. It's like apples to something else that's not even a fruit. Mm-hmm. The idea that we make, for example, 22 episodes of Blackish a year. And then it's up against, we were nominated for Best Comedy this year at the Emmys, and every other single comedy that was nominated in that category made fewer than 10 episodes. So it's like you can't even really compare those things. What I will say about both Kenya and Shonda, when you look at some of the episodes of Blackish that Kenya has done with us, the Lemons episode that he did that aired after the election, the episode that focused on the N-word, the episode that dealt with gun violence, he was able to tell some really big, very provocative, really important stories on a broadcast platform. And what is also great about broadcast is that we reach on average 140 million households. We are in 99.9% of homes. And when you want to tell a story against a big backdrop, broadcast television is the place to do it. Now, that said, we are still beholden to the FCC. We have broadcast standards and practices. You have to deal with commercials. And so I understand, Shonda is a really, really close friend of mine. And one of the things she was looking to do after basically a 16-year run at ABC was to work without some of those constraints. And while we would always hold up Scandal as an example of a show that could be just as provocative, just as dangerous, just as sexy as anything in streaming, you're still working within those limitations. And so I do understand that people at certain points want to try different things creatively.
So, and Disney is launching its own direct-to-consumer streaming service soon. Disney owns ABC, of course. So does that give you a platform where you can be a little bit more experimental? It'll
give the company a platform, as it's my job to sort of run still our linear broadcast business. But because we now are going to have this new space to explore and be a part of, it is going to give us the opportunity to tell different kinds of stories within sort of our own company, which we're very excited about.
Okay. So I want to ask, we're going to get to Roseanne now, and then we do want to take a question or two from the audience, so please be thinking. So as you look back at what happened, and I know you've been asked this, but is there something that you would have done differently? Because Roseanne was known, this was not some fluke out of the blue thing. She had a history of really inflammatory tweets and language. And so do you have regrets about greenlighting the show in the first place? Do you have any regrets about how any of it was handled?
I don't have regrets about greenlighting the show in the first place because there was a great creative conversation that we had with all of the executive producers about the kinds of stories that they wanted to tell. And those broader stories that dealt with a certain part of our country, particularly people that are a little more challenged economically. We wanted to do a comedy that focused on a blue-collar, working-class family, and I feel like the first season's worth of episodes that we did hit all the places that we wanted to hit narratively, and I'm really proud of those episodes. And when things came to a point with Roseanne where a change had to be made, we were able to make it very swiftly and decisively. What makes me the happiest is that we were able to put together The Connors, which is kind of our spin-off. John Goodman and Laurie Metcalf and Sarah Gilbert are back, and we were able to keep majority of the writers and creative people that were involved in the show still involved. So I'm happy that we were able to put everybody back to work. And Tuesday, October 16th, check it out.
Small plug. Well, so let me ask you this, because I think all of us can agree that the kind of racist tweet that Roseanne put out there and that kind of thinking and language has no place for any platform, that we don't want to give that a platform.
Correct.
But there are gray areas. That is not one. There are gray areas, and how do people in this room, given the current politically polarized climate. How do you as a leader make that decision? How do you communicate it? You communicated in this case very swiftly, very succinctly, but what's your advice from what you learned?
It is, look, every case and every situation is different, and we bump up against this quite a bit because we're living in times that are very politically charged, and we work with actors and showrunners and producers who have their own views that they want to express on social media, on panels, on stages, and you don't want to infringe on someone's freedom of speech or their ability to share their views, but at a certain point there is a standard of behavior that we are looking for the people who are a part of the Walt Disney Company, and in this case, unfortunately, that tweet crossed a line.
Okay, question over here for Channing.
Yes. So congratulations, Channing, on everything that you've done for ABC, especially with respect to introducing diversity and inclusion on a broadcast network. So well done. So At the diversity and inclusion luncheon, one of the questions that came up was what could men do to support and foster more women? And we talked about actually, standing up and pushing and giving people the shot.
Yes.
So can you talk to the audience about how you created Shonda Rhimes' reign, if you will, and what that conversation was like in the boardroom and getting people to give her the shot? One show is one thing, but to own Thursday night is a whole different ball game. So talk to us about the sale process, please.
Well, look, I think, Shonda created Shonda. I mean, she is a remarkable talent and a voice of a generation in so many respects. I think that what happened, when we had Grey's and Scandal, and then actually Pete Nowak, who was sort of a writer who grew up on the Shonda shows, and he's the creator of How to Get Away with Murder. Shonda and Betsy are the executive producers. It made sense for us to do that three-stack because the shows all have a similar style and feel, and we love the kind of diverse, multiracial cast and all of the rest of it. I think that in that case, it really made sense for those shows to go together, and it allowed us to build a really incredible platform. I think in a broader sense, what we are proud of at ABC, what I'm so proud of, is that we do have a number of shows that, whether they feature an entirely diverse cast, like Blackish or Fresh Off the Boat, or are shows that basically just reflect the world that we live in back to our audience, we have managed to, I think, set the creative standard for that, especially in terms of on-screen talent. One of the things that we're constantly working on right now is bringing more diversity behind the scenes and really looking to make sure that we are nurturing voices, writers of color, more female showrunners, and also looking at the way that we staff up our crews. I was really happy with our pilot season last year where half of our directors were women, and that comes from me speaking about it to my direct reports, making sure that they're talking about it with their teams, and putting programs in place like that. We have programs that allow, for example, young up-and-coming writers and directors to meet with more experienced people, because people tend to hire who they know, and if you can get these young writers and directors of color in rooms with the people who have the ability to do the hiring, that's when you really get to make change.
Great. Well, Channing, thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll see you next year, hopefully. Talk about the Connors.
That's good.
I'll see you down there.